Good morning, everyone. This morning, I am going to do my report on contemporary, popular, emergent, and contemporary literature. I am assigned to do a video report on this one. So, my report is all about 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez under the um, literary genre of magical realism. So, I am going to discuss the genre first before my other classmates, my group mates would discuss the a novel. So, what is magical realism? Magical realism is a literary style that combines a realistic narrative with surreal elements of dream or fantasy, where magical elements are presented as a natural part of the ordinary world. So, in magical realism, there is no world building. So, when we say world building, there's creation of a new world, there's creation of a new language, and the setting and the reality that is present in or the world that the characters are moving into that place is different from our kind of reality. So that's what it means when we say magical realism. There's no world building. That's according to Zamora and Faris. So another definition of magical realism is that it is a mode of narration that naturalizes the supernatural, integrating fantastic elements into a realistic setting without drawing attention to their strangeness. So just like in one of the examples of our novel, Remedios actually flew. She ascended to the heaven, and not a lot of people question it because they considered it as a part of their reality. Next, magical realism versus fantasy. Because while I was doing my report, I asked myself, if that's the definition of magical realism, then what sets it apart from fantasy? So, upon research, according to Bowers, magical realism presents the magical as a normal part of everyday life and does not question or explain the supernatural, whereas fantasy typically creates entirely imagined worlds with their own rules and logic. So just like what I've said a while back, in magical realism, there's no world building. So it is different from fantasy because in fantasy, there is world building, but the presence of magical power are both present in magical realism and fantasy. So first, let's now go on to the historical background. Historical background of magical realism. It started in its early roots in European art 1920s. The term magical realism or Magischer Realismus was first coined in 1925 by Franz Roh, a German art critic, to describe a visual art movement that combined realistic techniques with mystical or dreamlike elements. So, the historical background of magical realism started actually in 1920s in the early roots of Europe. Um, Franz Roh is actually not a writer. As upon research, he's actually not a writer, and the movement of magical realism did not start from literature. It actually started from painting. So it is a interdisciplinary, or yes, interdisciplinary, um what's this uh idea. It first started off as from painting in World War II, then it transcended into literature. Next is emergence in Latin America literature. Magical realism truly gained literary significance in Latin America during the mid 20th century. The term was adopted by Latin American writers to describe a narrative mode that could express local histories, mythologies, and political realities through magical elements. A key figure in this transition was Alejo Carpentier, a Cuban novelist who introduced the concept of L'Oreal Maravilloso, the marvelous real. In his 1949 prologue, The Kingdom of This World, Carpentier argued that Latin American reality itself was so unusual and dramatic that it did not need invention. It only needed to be narrated truthfully. So, because Latin America was invaded by Europeans, and Europeans used surrealism, but surrealism and the way that they write do not really capture the essence and the magic of Latin America. So hence, magical realism was created, and unfortunately, magical realism was created due to colonization. And in this novel, this novel talks a lot about massacre, especially in the Banana Corporation. It talks about massacre, power play, power tripping, and the unfair treatment of this colonizer of these people in their own land, and especially slavery. Because during that time, not only were the Latinx people were suffering, but also the black people, because um as the as these white uh supremacists, as this European went to Latin America, they brought with them the black people. The Latin American boom, magical realism became internationally recognized during the Latin American boom, a period when authors from the region gained global acclaim. So, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, in 1967, is considered the definitive magical realist novel. So, Gabriel Garcia Marquez is actually a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and before he was able to write um, 100 Years of Solitude, he experienced writer's block for 5 years. And after that, he was able to write 100 Years of Solitude, um, and then because of that, he gained a lot of international recognition. And not only that, the genre magical realism stayed in Latin America, but it also branched out to other parts of the world. No, but it really began in Latin America because of colonization and everything, and because how uh what's this how surrealist genre by the Europeans cannot truly capture what the everyday essence, what everyday the everyday lives of people in Latin America. Global spread and post-colonial usage. So 1980s present, just like what I've said a while back. Magical realism expanded beyond Latin America and was embraced by writers in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and the United States. So one of the writers of magical realist is Toni Morrison's beloved. That's actually considered as a magical realism. He's an American writer. Sulman Rushdie in Midnight Children 1981 is India, UK. He's an Indian man living in United Kingdom. Toni Morrison, Ben Okri. Characteristics of magical realism. Realistic setting. Magical realism is characterized by the settings that are firmly grounded in reality. The world described the author often mirrors the real world, complete with familiar locations, everyday life, and historical context. However, this world becomes infused with magical or supernatural elements that are presented as normal and are unremarkable. Magical events treated as normal, just like what I've said a while back. Next is use of folklore, myths, and legends. Magical realism often incorporates local folklore, myths, and cultural legends, making them central to narrative. These elements are not treated as fantasy, but as valid and integral parts of the culture being depicted. So it is more cultural than it being fantastical. Hybridity of realities. Magical realism often portrays multiple realities coexisting simultaneously. The magical world does not replace the real one but exists alongside it. These often represent different ways of seeing worlds, such as indigenous perspectives versus colonial or modern views. Proponents, we have, of course, Gabriel Garcia Marquez from Colombia, the writer of the topic that we're going to discuss now. Next is Alejandro Carpentier, writer of The Kingdom of This World, and Jorge Luis Borges and Miguel Angel Ostrias. Actually, there are a lot of proponents in the magical realism genre, but I only included those people who are Latinx because just like I said a while back, magical realism is rooted from Latin America and due to colonization. So I guess it's just right that we recognize first those people who are Latinx. Then lastly, we have one Wolfo. Despite writing only a small number of works, Juan Rulfo is considered a founding figure of magical realism. In Latin America literature, his influence lies not only in quantity but in the depth, tone, and worldwide view he brought to his fiction. So, magical realism, as I've known and read some of it, of the work, some of literary works under this literary genre, it does not focus about fantasy and power. It's more of like it talks more often about realities that we have in this world, just like El Señor Presidente. It talks about the dictatorship of the president, the Alep. I'm not sure about the Alep, but yeah, most of the magical realism that I've read is it's there's more realistic elements and there's more realistic problems, societal problems than it having a lot of fantastical elements. So I guess that's all. Thank you.